Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to all the viewers. And as promised, we have one more passage today. And this is a slightly difficult passage because, as I have been mentioning and stating this for quite some time, that you should be used to reading passages which are not of your taste, in the sense that you should try to read topics and articles which are difficult, abstract, and for which you don't have too much of liking or preference. It is precisely these kind of articles and passages that will go and make you a good reader of reading comprehension passages, particularly from the CAT perspective, right? So I have put a few golden rules here, and I will always repeat at the start of my reading activity that you have to follow these four principles. The first says that ignore the intricate details. Whenever you have some kind of detailing, just forget about it. Don't worry much about it. Map the key nouns. So whenever you see important nouns, you have to understand that what is the relationship between those important nouns. This is really very important. The key nouns will help you decide the central idea of the passage. Get the gist of the paragraph. So for example, if you look at this is one paragraph. Sometimes paragraphs can be very, very long, and in fact one entire passage could only have two paragraphs. So you have to get the gist of every paragraph, and you have to connect the central idea, or you have to connect the gist of each paragraph to form the central idea. And the last says that leave that part which you find difficult to understand. So I will read this passage, and at the end I will take a question, and I will show you that how we can answer the question if we have properly understood the broader picture. Right? So we will take the question towards the end. So I would want you to first read the passage and then see how we take that question. Because without the question, we would not know whether we have comprehended the passage well or not. Right? So let's read it. It says the relationship of the professional artist to the class that ruled or aspired to rule was complicated, various, and should not be simplified. So here you have the first sentence with which many of you might not be familiar, but it tells you that the professional artist had relationship with someone. And who was that person? It was the ruling class, or the one who ruled, right? The artist's training, however, which made the artist a professional, taught a set of conventional skills. That is to say, the artist became skilled in using a set of conventions of composition, drawing, perspective, etc. And these conventions corresponded so closely to the social experience or the social manners of the class the artist was serving, right? That they were not even seen as conventions, but were thought of as the only way of recording and preserving eternal truth. Yet, to the other social classes, such professional painting appeared to be so remote from their own experience that they saw it as a mere social convention, a mere accoutrement of the class that ruled over them, which is why, in moments of revolt, painting and sculpture were often destroyed. Now, for many of you, this is not going to be an easy paragraph. I'm telling you, because this is how a tough passage in CAT would look like. But you have to go to the very crux of the matter. It's now, if you ask me that what are the key nouns in this paragraph, I will list it down here. The first key noun is the artist. I know that the author is talking about artist, and then he mentions something called as the class, or rather the class that is ruling, or the class that the artist is serving. And the third word that comes is the word convention. He has frequently used the word all these conventions, right? Training and conventions. So what exactly, how are these three words related? The author says that the relationship of the professional artist is with the class, and he's carrying out all the artistic activities to serve the ruling class. This is what he says. And these conventions corresponded so closely to the social experience of the class the artist was serving. So whatever the convention was designed by the artist, by the professional artist, was meant to serve only the ruling class. Yet the other social classes were so remote that they saw it as a mere source. So basically, you are serving the interest of only one class and the other classes are ignored. And this is basically based on the convention, right? So what do we have from this paragraph? The professional artist is serving the interest of the ruling class, the other classes are ignored, and this serving is based on a set of conventions which basically in which the artist was trained. In the second paragraph, the author says, during the 19th century, certain artists for consciously social or political reasons tried to extend the professional tradition of painting so that it might express the experience of other classes. Now you have something additional. Earlier, the artists used to paint with conventions serving only a certain class, and now there was a change in the 19th century, and the artists tried to extend the tradition of painting to express the experience of other classes, their personal struggles, their failures, and the opposition they met. Perhaps one pedestrian example. So this is what I call as basically exemplifying what has been given earlier. So this becomes an easy paragraph for me. Why? Because first of all, the main point of this paragraph is that in the 19th century or during the 19th century, some artists, they thought of expressing the experience of the other classes as well. And then the author gives an example. A pedestrian example means a very common example. And what is that common example? The painting work, and it says here, it shows a team of laborers with passers-by and bystanders. It took the painter 10 years to complete it at one level, but it looks like a religious scene. Some would argue that this is because the artist's attitude to his subject was ambivalent. I would argue that all the visual means he was using with such great with such care preempted the possibility of depicting manual work as the main subject in any but. So, the author has given an example of a painting which is serving as an example that the artists were trying to express the experience of other class. And in this example, the author is giving this example in which the painter has tried to express the experience of some other class. That's it, nothing else. So you have the first paragraph, you have the second paragraph. Let's go in. So here we have the next paragraph, and it says, the crisis provoked by those who try to extend the area of experience to which painting might be open continued into the 20th century. But its terms were reversed, the author says. He says that the tradition was indeed dismantled, yet except for the introduction of the unconscious, the area of experience from which most European artists drew remained surprisingly unchanged. Consequently, most of the serious art of the period dealt with either the experience of various kinds of isolation or with the narrow experience of the painting itself. The latter produced painting about painting abstract art. Now the problem is, if you look at this paragraph, this becomes slightly difficult. Why? Because the author says the crisis provoked by those who try to extend the experience to which a painting might be open. So basically, the artists who tried to extend the experience of the painting went into the 20th century as well. In the earlier paragraph, they said that in the 19th century, the artists tried to take the experience they try to take the experience of the wider social class as well. And now he says that this went into the 20th century as well. The tradition, the author says, was indeed dismantled. What kind of tradition? The tradition of painting with the conventions only to serve a social class, that is the ruling class. And the author says that the tradition was indeed dismantled. Yet, except for the introduction of the unconscious, the area of experience from which most European artists drew remains surprisingly unchanged. So the author is giving a very contradictory statement. He says that the tradition was dismantled, but the things remained surprisingly unchanged. And then he says one of the reasons, the potential freedom gained by the dismantling of the tradition was not used the way painters were still trained. In academics and art schools, they first learned those very conventions which were being dismantled. So you are dismantling a convention, but when you go to the academies to learn the painting, you are basically learning the same convention. So you go to a school, you learn a set of conventions. When you come out, you dismantle the conventions. So what the author is saying, that the things remained surprisingly unchanged because in the academies and the art school, the artists first learned those conventions which were being dismantled. This was because no other professional body of knowledge exists to be taught. So basically, whatever you are taught was the only thing that could be taught. And that is the reason why, even though you dismantled the convention, things very much remained unchanged. And then towards the end, you have the conclusion. It says, thus extreme of abstract art demonstrates, as an epilogue, the original uncertainty of professional art, an art in reality concerned with a selective, very reduced area of experience, which nevertheless claims to be universal. So what is exactly happening? Even though you are dismantling the area of even though you are dismantling the conventions, effectively, because you are getting trained in the same conventions, eventually you are, keeping things surprisingly unchanged, the author says. And that's the reason why an art in reality concerned with a very selective, reduced area of experience, which nevertheless claims to be universal. So it claims to be universal because it thinks that it has dismantled the tradition, but because you are learning the same conventions when you go to an art school, you are surprisingly keeping everything unchanged. So what exactly do we get from the entire paragraph? Now, many of you must have read this paragraph. We get to know that the passage focuses on artists' experience in painting, and in their painting they are expressing the experience of a particular social class only. Though in the 19th and the 20th century there were artists who tried to extend the experience of this class, things remained primarily unchanged according to the author, because when they went for the training in the academies, the artists were taught the very same conventions. There was no other method of teaching, and that is the reason why the art expressed the experience of a selective class, even though they claimed that they are universal. That is basically what the central idea of the passage is. So if I have read the passage, there are 5 words that have struck me. The word painting, the word artist, the word convention, the word social class. And when I connect these keywords, I get to know that the painting and the artist served the experience of only one class. In 19th and 20th century, some artists tried to express the experience of other classes as well, but then eventually things remain unchanged, because in the academies they were taught the very same conventions which they came out and dismantled. So things basically remain the same. Now, there's a very, very good question, and it says the passage implies that art is at its best when. Now, nowhere has the author said that when is art at its best. But then he has been talking about something, and that's the reason why the question says implies. Implies means to indirectly say something. That means basically when you want to say something indirectly, I would say, what are you implying? So the author has discussed lots of things. What is he implying out of these 4? Is it that that art is best when it treats religious themes, or is art best when it reflects social manners? Religion is not the focus. In fact, it is not the argument of the author. Not even social manners. We can have only 2 choices. One is when art is at its best when it transcends conventions, or art is at its best when it records eternal truths. Now, if you look at the passage, the conventions has been the author's primary target. He says the conventions aren't changing. In the academies, you are learning the same conventions. That's why, even though you try to dismantle those conventions, your art will primarily remain the same. That's why he is implying that if you transcend the conventions, your art will become universal. Otherwise, it won't. That is the reason why A is the choice. And what have we used? We have used the keyword that we got in the paragraph, the word convention, the word art, and the author says that the conventions have to be transcended. Why? Because only then your art will become universal, which he is discussing towards the end. A is the right choice. So there is no need even to look at the passage, because once you have understood the central idea, the core idea, you can mark the answer effortlessly with greater confidence. So people who are interested in enrolling for the verbal course, you can find the description in the description below. And this is the way you have to read the passage, because this passage is not the one that you would love to read, but still you have to go ahead. You have to get used to the language. You have to get used to the method and the style that the author is using to express his ideas. And secondly, towards the end, what I had done, I had connected things very quickly. I said that the tradition was indeed dismantled, yet things remained unchanged. And then lots of things I ignored. Why? Because I know they're not important. What is important is that the tradition remain unchanged. Why? Because of the potential freedom gained by the dismantling of the tradition was not used to be the way painters were trained. So the way the painters were trained was still the same. In the academies and art school, they first learned those very conventions which were being dismantled. So this sentence is enough for me to bring everything together. In the sense that when you read a passage, lots of things will not be understood by you. But there, all of a sudden, you will come across one sentence which will clear everything. So you have to patiently wait for that one sentence. And this sentence is that in the academies and art schools, they first learned those very conventions which were being dismantled. And as a result, the author says earlier that things remain surprisingly unchanged. I hope you have enjoyed this session. If you have any queries with respect to reading and speed reading and comprehension, just drop the query in the comment box and we'll try to address those queries in our videos. Thanks a lot for participating.